an assault on the senses. Godzilla fans, are we happy? Yeah! Kong fans, are we happy? What about Mothra fans? And then what about kids? I know there's a bunch of kids in here. Kids, are we happy? Thumbs up. Yes! Okay, come on, kids. So thank you for coming, thank you for joining us, thank you for watching this film. Let's bring to the stage the man who gave us Godzilla vs. Kong. He also gave us Godzilla, Kong, the New Empire. He's the reigning king of monsters. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Wingard.
Yeah, buddy.
There we go. How does it feel? This has been a long, long journey for you. You started as a kid. I mean, like your early years were growing up on these movies. How's it feel?
Since I started in the Monsterverse, yes, it has been a long time.
A long time.
No, I mean, I started watching Godzilla movies when I was, honestly, I can't remember the first time I ever saw a Godzilla or a King Kong film. They just always kind of existed in my reality. So they've just always been there, just like anything else. It's one of those things where I think I remember, my really first kind of imprinting on Godzilla, especially though, was, being home before I was in school or anything. So however old you are at that age, and the Godzilla films were always playing on daytime television. And King Kong. 76 Kong was for some reason always playing on TV, I remember, and it was really depressing. I like that movie. It's just the ending is literally depressing. That period, it was the main thing that was playing on television when it came to the Godzilla movies were all the Showa films, and the main ones that stick out were Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. Hedorah and Astro Monster or Monster Zero, that one. Those are the three that imprinted on me, as you can see here.
When you got the opportunity to come back after Godzilla vs. Kong, when you got the opportunity to come back to this, were you immediately like, I want to go to that Showa era, I want to trip people out? How did you get here exactly?
Yeah, well, I mean, the main thing was when I made Godzilla vs. Kong, up until that point, I had made a whole lot of indie movies, and I had kind of avoided visual effects for budgetary reasons, because I knew a lot of other filmmakers who had made smaller films, and they kind of thought, well, this thing didn't work, we'll fix it later, we'll try to do some visual effects on it, and it always looked like garbage. And so I was like terrified of having bad visual effects in my films, so I just avoided them. So all my early movies were very practically driven special effects films. So fast forward, here I am doing a Godzilla vs. Kong movie, and this is the first time that I can really rely on the visual effects being good. So, but at the same time, having done all these other films, there was nothing that could have prepared me for Godzilla vs. Kong. It was like to me, it was a learning experience, and it was only like towards the end of production that I felt like, well, damn, I'm getting the swing of this thing, and I'm really starting to understand really how to fully utilize, especially the heavy animated sequences, how to play with these characters as characters in the same way that you would almost like an animated film, just more hyper-realistic. And I remember there was like an interview I read with Quentin Tarantino, who's like my favorite filmmaker other than John Carpenter, and he, like, somebody asked him about why he did Hateful Eight after Django Unchained, and he had a really interesting answer. And I remember it kind of boiled down to the fact that he too, was like, he felt like he had just learned how to shoot a Western at the end of Django, and all the things that, encompass that. And so he was inspired to take that knowledge and do another one. And so that's really what was, I really related to that, and I thought about that a lot, because that's exactly how I felt with the Monsterverse. It was like, I'm ready to take all I've learned and go into this next film and really try to, push these kind of very visual, nonverbal sequences with the monsters further, because I knew from my experience that we could do that, and that's the movie that I always wanted to see when I was a kid.
And that's exactly what you delivered here. I wasn't joking. We've got some kids in the audience, and they totally loved it. When I first watched this film, I was like, "Where was this film when I was 10 years old? Like, this is the film that I'd always dreamed of." But you've taken it just an infinitely step further, and there's a ton of inspirations in here. Exterminator 2 T-shirt. Does anyone else see that? Yes, there we go. You're in a happy house here. There's a ton of inspirations in here. We played this a playlist you gave us earlier. So there's a ton of 80s music in there. There's like references to Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Kiss in there. But then there's also like Thundercats and He-Man. I feel like you channeled your formative years, and we're watching your childhood. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I tried to listen to all the little things that I said to myself when I was, a really little kid, probably starting as early as 4 years old. When I watched movies, I was like, oh, why do these adults always do this shit? Sorry, kids. So that's exactly what I tried to lead into, and I feel like sometimes I do my best work when I'm really pulling in those John Carpenter influences as well. And with this film in particular, I knew that Godzilla and Kong were going to team up in this film. That was the whole impetus behind the movie. But they're complicated characters, and the thing, I took a lot of inspiration from the movie They Live, which is my favorite film of all time. And the thing about that movie I love is that the best sequence in the film is it's not the hero versus the villain, it's the two heroes fighting each other. So that alleyway fight scene is one of my favorite sequences of all time, and so that's sort of what was the inspiration behind the big pyramid sequence.
Yeah, you just decided.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah, you decided to destroy Cairo in the process.
Well, I like how, like, if you really watch that sequence, like, Godzilla destroys one of the major pyramids there just by stumbling into it. It's not a big deal.
It is a bit of a bar fight. I mean, like, when Godzilla first comes to Kong's like, no, bro, I don't want this. And then and the sand in the face. And it's kind of rookie shit.
It is, yeah. And like, I like that we got a suplex in there.
Yeah!
I tell you, like, the main thing that my biggest regret so far is that I keep wanting to get a Stone Cold Stunner in my yeah, so, I mean, that if anything, if I was ever going to do another one of these, that would be like the main thing. So I was like, well, we gotta get a Stunner.
How involved, so Simon, your longtime collaborator, so he was obviously one of the writers on this. How involved are you in the writing process and setting this thing up? I mean, do you literally like just pull up a map and say, okay, yeah, let's destroy Sao Paulo. That's cool. Let's destroy Rock of Gibraltar. I went there when I was a kid. Let's have Godzilla just dive off that.
Well, you're always trying to juxtapose the Titans to, real places and things that big iconic locations. And the greatest homage the monsters can do is to destroy a city, that and who wouldn't want their city, their hometown destroyed by Godzilla and yeah, I mean, like, so I can't remember the fucking question.
It was about the writing process and how involved were you?
It seemed like trying to be selfish and we're talking about other people and so I was so delighted to be able to bring in my friend Simon Barrett, who he wrote The Guest and You're Next, and he's my favorite collaborator that I've had over these years. And so he and I worked with Terry Rossio, who wrote Godzilla vs. Kong as well, and he's done a lot of great films like Aladdin and Shrek, and it was an interesting process because Terry's almost like a professor type. You go over to his house and he's got this amazing system that Simon and I actually learned a lot from, where he has it down to like this this incredible methodology of how to break a movie. And so for a couple months we'd go over, or a couple weeks we'd go over to Terry's house, and basically what he does is he has a cork board that's a certain size. I can't remember the exact dimensions off the top of my head. But basically he has a cork board that's a certain size and note cards that are all a certain size. And he has very specific things that he lays out, like one level is, or one row is essentially what happens before the film. One row is Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then Act 4, or not Act 4, oh God. It's not a Michael Bay movie, you know, but then the other one is something like, I can't remember, it's like character stuff and some taglines and things. But basically he has this theory that if, with these exact specifications, you can fill, if you fill up this corkboard, you got a movie, you know? And so it is an interesting way to start because it gives you real confidence. You really talk it through, you beat it up, and then you get into the actual writing of it, and that kind of encompasses the next couple months after that.
And there's a far greater emphasis, I think, more than any of the monster movies that we've seen, certainly the monsters. There's a far greater emphasis on the monsters, the titans as characters. You spend more time with them. There are great lengths in the film in which there are no humans talking, but when you scripted this, or when this film was scripted, Kong had lines.
That's right, yeah. Like, because, I mean, honestly, like, I'm guilty of this too. I mean, so often when we read scripts, when making movies, you tend to kind of breeze through a little bit more of the description because it can be kind of tedious to read, and so you kind of always are skipping to the dialogue parts just to keep you going. And so the way we wrote the monster sequences sometimes is we would, instead of saying Kong roars at Scar King, Scar King roars at Kong, we would actually write out the dialogue as what the roar means, So that made it kind of a nice way to kind of get to the script and really understand that, like, we're not just treating the monsters as props, it's like they are the leads of the movie, and there's a lot going on there.
It's awesome. Because you really get a sense of these monsters as actual characters outside of just the facial and the bodily reactions. The person who does get the best lines, though, certainly Mr. Dan Stevens. You obviously worked with him on the guest all those years ago. What was it like reuniting back then? And when you were casting, did you instinctively think of him when you're working with the writers? Did you always envision?
Yeah, we wrote the part with Dan in mind. That's the advantage of working with Simon on this film is, we knew Dan, and so we kind of tailored this part around with him in mind. And it's kind of funny because because I worked with Dan, I have a great relationship with him, and we're friends in real life and everything. And when we were on set, the other actors like Brian Tyree Henry and Rebecca especially would start teasing me because they're like, "Oh, you just love Dan so much," And so I would start leaning into that, and so we would do these like long takes where it's just Rebecca and Brian doing all this dialogue, and Dan's off to the side, and at the end of the scene, Dan might have one line, and when I'd call cut, I'd be like, "Dan, that was amazing." I'd go over the color and stuff, and it's kind of embarrassing to it, and they would just be like, "You son of a bitch."
I get the sense that Dan wasn't acting much in this film. It just seems that like that's who he is as a person. He looks like he's having a blast. I think it was kind of a grueling shoot because you're in so many locations, and it was obviously really difficult. But then the camaraderie with the cast, it feels like it was kind of fun.
Yeah, they all hit it off so well, and just by coincidence, Rebecca Hall and Dan Stevens have known each other basically all their lives. Like, I think they're roommates at some point in college or something, which I guess we're kind of referencing this movie in a roundabout way. But yeah, I mean, like this cast was just great. You always knew that they were on set because you could just hear them laughing on the other end of the sound stage, and yeah, we went all over the world. We went to these ancient kind of rainforests up in Daintree, Australia, and I had some weird experiences there. Something some kind of slightly freaky stuff where
ayahuasca.
Well, it's like ayahuasca without doing ayahuasca. I had some moments where when we first went to the rainforest and we were committing to shooting there, I started having these like weird dreams, and then I started finding out that other principal crew members were having, strange dreams as well. Some of the actors were and stuff. And specifically, like, the closer we got to the shoot, the dreams got more intense. And right before we started shooting in this really rare part of the rainforest that nobody had ever shot in, there's these plants that are like 2,000 years old. I started having these like nightmares where like the trees were like, coming to life, and they were like wrapping the roots around my neck, and it was like,
that sounds awful.
Yeah, well, it is like I woke up like just like it was really strange, and I just had this feeling like, oh my God, if I screw up anything in this jungle, like I'm gonna be cursed for life, So the whole time we were shooting there, I just was so paranoid, because your footprint on a movie like this is massive, and so you got techno cranes out there, but we tried to like work so intricately around all this wildlife there, trying not to harm it. And man, I tell you, I was just on the edge of my seat that whole time, because I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, harming anything out there.
We have some writers in the room, and I know that they're like, that's a good pitch, I'm taking that. So this was also the first film that you shot in IMAX, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. First time Godzilla's been in IMAX, technically.
Yeah. And it's so cool to be able to fully utilize that format. I mean, it's the perfect, series for it.
Was it liberating? Like, did it feel liberating, or was there like some kind of sense of pressure there because it's like, oh, I'm dealing with a different canvas now?
No, not really. I mean, because we weren't shooting on actual IMAX film, so it wasn't really that different day to day per se. We had to accommodate for a lot, but we always knew that mainly we were going to be focusing our sequences. It was actually pretty easy to understand what we were planning, because it was like, well, there's going to be a lot of these full CGI sequences, and some of those have like overlap with the live action stuff, but for the most part, it was like, well, these are the big sequences. This is what you're going to want to see in IMAX. And so I think we ended up with like 50 minutes or so of pure IMAX footage.
Yeah,
Full ratio.
I had the opportunity to see it in IMAX, and it is amazing. So if you tell everyone to go see the film, then also tell them to go see it in IMAX as well. That's because it really is. It's super badass. Take a couple questions from the audience. Is that cool? We have gentleman right there. Yeah.
All right. I want to say thank you for having the camera move a lot. It's really interesting as hell. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's funny because one of the things we try to do is always think about the putting lenses in front of the monster action. So even when we're doing CGI, we always wanted to kind of dirty it up. And Ben Saracen is the DP. He went to Panavision and specifically created some of the lenses for this movie. He's taken all this old glass from different eras, and they're kind of combining all this stuff. And that's why the movie has this really kind of like trippy look sometimes, where almost like only this much is in focus because the lenses are so warped and they're anamorphic and stuff. And so the VFX team ended up kind of being able to take those lenses, and they scanned all the nuance of that, and they were able to integrate that into the full visual effects sequences, which really helped. And then of course we just showed the camera, which usually people are mad at me for shaking the camera too much, but in this case, I think it helps kind of immerse you and believe that it's actually being photographed.
It really is immersive. I had this weird flashback that the Cinematheque last year, they had 70mm Apocalypse Now, and that film just kind of creeps up on you, and it just becomes this complete assault. I walked out of the room, went to the restroom, and it was only when I came back in that I realized, oh my God, this is such an assault on the senses. I had the exact same reaction today with this. Like, it creeps up on you before you know it. It's so full on. I stepped outside and came back in, it was the exact same thing. It's just hitting me from all angles. How do you make something so complete?
Well, first off, thank you for saying that. That's a great plug, but I would never try to compare myself to Apocalypse Now. I don't know. I mean, like, this goes into what we were talking about earlier, about wanting to do another one of these films following it up, and it was really like understanding, how to communicate with the animators about nuances with how to photograph the monster sequences, even though they're going to be full CGI scenes, and you know, and even in that classic way, like we were talking about going to Daintree, we really try to push a lot of location shooting because, you know, there's only so many ways you can create Godzilla and King Kong in a movie, and they all pretty much, you know, require CGI. But where possible, it's like, well, if we got these scenes with these great actors, let's really put them in these cool locations and do it for real.
Yeah, you did. Okay, another question. There's someone who's waving, pointing at something. Yes.
Okay. Great movie. I'm totally seeing it again in IMAX this weekend. So what I particularly love about this movie, and really going back to all of you MonsterVerse directors, from Garrett, Jordan, to Michael, is that you really do care about your monster characters and give them arcs. And this is the thing that I always say about monster movies, is that if you're writing a character who's not human, you still have to write them in a way that you would write a human character. Like, you gotta give them a fatal flaw, you gotta give them character arcs, you gotta give them like an emotional journey to go through. And I was able to follow like Kong's emotional journey very well. I was able to follow Godzilla's emotional journey very well. Right down to the point where it's like, I didn't even need the human character to fully explain it. It's like the scenes of Kong and Mini Kong by himself, it's like I fully understood everything that was happening there. So I wanted to ask you, what do you say about like how to give non-human characters an arc, and how do you decide like what that arc should be? Like how did you decide, I want Kong to have this arc, I want Godzilla to have this arc?
Okay. How do you give non-human characters an arc?
Yeah, I mean, that was honestly the easiest part of making this movie. I mean, like, because I felt so in tune with Godzilla and Kong, the MonsterVerse versions of them, and you know, one of the greatest satisfactions I got out of this movie is like hearing people get excited about the new monsters too, because Shimo is another character that, you know, she's a new character to the series, and you know, she's the big menacing villain, but ultimately she's kind of this sweet, you know, almost like puppy dog character, you know, like you got Kong petting her at the end of the movie, and I like that arc, you know. Those are the things that, you know, excite me about the monsters, because I mean, there's really no other series that I could imagine really where you're given so much license to, you know, do these kind of sequences without any dialogue, and you know, and carry it through like that. And you know, I'm just lucky, you know, to be working with such great animators over at Weta. You know, our visual effects supervisor, Alessandro Garo, Scanline, you know, the whole 9 yards. Like, it takes so many people to do this, and you know, I think the key to it, to a certain degree, as a director, is just leaning into the collaborative aspect of it. You know, because there's just so many people involved that it takes, you know, to make this stuff happen, and it's really trying to allow everybody to do the best work that they can. And so, you know, sometimes, like for instance, like with the Scar King. The way he comes out and he stands and he kind of poses, you know, and before he attacks Kong the first time, there's just like little mannerisms like that I couldn't have, you know, imagined when we were doing the previs. But you know, the Weta guys got in there and they started really, you know, like, you know, they're like, we're going to present something to the team, you know, like we got to come up with all these like nuances, and so they just started leaning into that.
Okay. You have to get on a plane, so we have one more question. Who's got the best
We
question?
have a little kid over here who's trying to ask somebody.
Okay, little kid wins. Okay. What's your name, little man? Ari. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's past your bedtime. Best dad.
For the facial expressions, did you use motion capture or is it all CGI?
For the facial expressions, did you use motion capture or was it CGI? And how do you know to ask the question?
That's the visual effects supervisors. Yeah, no, it's you know, there's no like one actor that plays as any of the characters, but each team kind of approaches it, you know, in their own sort of way. And yeah, they do motion capture for the a lot of the facial stuff, you know, the nuanced facial stuff, especially with the apes. And pretty much all the times that the apes are moving around, that's always motion capture. You know, like we really kind of put like a lot of the main sequences in Hollow Earth with Kong and all the other apes in the hands of Weta, because I mean, they're like the experts at doing apes. They've done all the Planet Apes movies, they've done the King Kong movies, with Peter Jackson and stuff. And so they just really understand those kind of things. And it's interesting because in the MonsterVerse, an ape isn't just like a normal ape. Like there's a little bit of slightly more of a humanoid element to it compared to, let's say, like Peter Jackson's King Kong, which is ultra realistic kind of ape gorilla type movements. And those kind of things, just everybody kind of understands what the difference is, and honestly, they're just so good at the process that it just all kind of works together very, very, very smoothly.
It's awesome. All right, tell all your friends at school tomorrow you had the best time ever.
Spring break.
Thank you for giving us another great Godzilla movie. Another great Thanks so much. Thank everybody for coming out. Go see this again this weekend in IMAX. Thanks, everybody.
Stick around in your seats. We're going to take a picture with Adam, guys.
Turn around, come back, sit down. Sorry about that. Yeah, turn around, sit back, come down, scoot in.
Hey, Adam, what's the mini card thing?
Is this mini con? That's pretty cool. Yeah, pero ¿dónde está? In the middle.
All right, everybody, I'm going to snap a couple really quick. On the count of 3, say GXK, all right? 3, 2, 1.
GXK!
A couple more. Can I get a GXK? One more.
GXK! Woo!
Okay.